Okay, copy down this example. What should I say before I start talking? The symbols. That's 0. Okay, the number 0. Square is that's a non-zero number. Okay, so the square here is meant to represent a non-zero number, non-zero number. And the star is meant to represent any number. Okay, so 0, square, star, these are numbers. Okay, 0 is 0. This is not specified, but it's a non-zero number. And this is just, could be anything. Could be 0, could be non-zero. Okay, I'm going to use these symbols to attack this question. Now, we're saying a non-zero 2 by 3. What do I mean by that? Well, the 0 2 by 3 is like this. So I would say that's the 0 matrix in the land of 2 by 3 matrices. So this is the 0 matrix, and any other matrix, any other 2 by 3 matrix, is what's called a non-zero 2 by 3 matrix. Okay, so there's only one 0 matrix, and everything else is called a non-zero matrix. Okay, how do I attack this question? Well, I am trying to make sure I account for every possibility. So we're counting here. We want to make sure we count everything. So I would say I need a way to divide up my problem. So it doesn't really matter, but what I'll do is I'll say I have a non-zero 2 by 3. There are 2 rows. There are 2 rows. And the matrix is non-zero. So that means there is either 1 pivot or 2 pivots. So I'll break it up that way. So I'll start by doing the case of 1 pivot. So 1 pivot. How can that happen? Well, what are the different columns that that pivot could be in? Well, it can be here, here, or here. So I have exactly 1 pivot. It's got to be here, here, or here. So that gives me 3 possibilities. Now I'm going to fill in the rest of these matrices shortly. Don't think I'm done. So in these 3 cases, I have 1 pivot. Okay, because I have 1 pivot for this guy, these have to be non-zeros. Or sorry, these have to be zeros. The second row has to be 0 here. And likewise, the second row has to be 0 here. And all zeros there. Now, for this guy to be a pivot, I'm going to need to have zeros here. Okay, if these were non-zero, then this would not be a pivot. Okay, similarly, this has to be 0. And now what can go here? Well, anything can go here. So I'll put a star there. And likewise, star here, star here. Okay, so again, I'm dividing my problem up into 2 pieces. I'm looking at the matrices that have 1 pivot, and then I'll look at the matrices that have 2 pivots. Okay, how can I have 2 pivots? Well, 2 pivots, meaning I have to choose 2 columns to put them in. So how can you think about that? So 2 columns are going to have a pivot. So my brain says, okay, 1 column is not going to have a pivot. And there are 3 different ways to choose that 1 column that does not have a pivot. So that's how my brain breaks it down. Your brain may function differently. Doesn't mean you're wrong. Different strokes for different folks. So what am I saying? Okay, here I'll say, okay, the 3rd column does not have a pivot. We'll go with that. And this one, we'll say the 2nd column does not have a pivot. Okay, throughout all this, I'm following echelon form. Okay, so I need to have this staircase thing. Okay, it does restrict where I put my 2nd pivot here. You know, I can't put a 2nd pivot here. This 1st row already has a pivot. Okay, my 2nd pivot has to go down here. Okay, so perhaps, you know, implicitly I'm remembering what the definition of echelon form is. And what's the last one? Last one is where my 1st column here does not have a pivot. So that means I have to go like this, and I have to go like this. I do not have a choice. Okay, how can I fill in the blanks? Well, pivots are leading entries when we're talking about echelon form. So that tells me I need to put zeros there. And the remainder is up for grabs. Can be anything. All right, so that's how I break it down. Just to reemphasize, in the past there's been a little bit of confusion about this. What do I mean by a non-zero matrix? Well, these are all non-zero matrices. There is only one zero matrix in this land of 2x3 matrices. Okay, this is what's called the 2x3 zero matrix. And I want to repeat that any other matrix is what's called a non-zero matrix.